Welcome back to another episode of Insects for Fun, and today we're diving into the fascinating world of one of nature's more peculiar little creatures, the tortoise beetle. Now, you've probably never heard of these guys, but after today, I promise you'll be out looking for one. Tortoise beetles belong to the family Cassidinae, which is also known as the leaf beetle family. We're not looking at the entirety of this family though, because it is massive and contains over 37,000 species. Instead, we'll be focused on the subfamily dedicated to today's feature, the Cassidinae. It is here that we can find the tortoise beetles. There's actually about 3,000 of these little critters, and they can be found throughout the world. But I'm sure you're wondering, why the name tortoise beetle? These beetles have flat, round bodies with a domed shell that's very reminiscent of a tortoise's shell. When they feel threatened, they tuck in their legs and heads, much like a tortoise. This gives them a sort of shielded look, helping them blend in with their surroundings or avoid predators. Plus, their shells often come in iridescent metallic colors, which can be incredibly stunning. As I mentioned earlier, there are about 3,000 species of tortoise beetles, and they can be found all over the world. They tend to favor warmer climates, but you can find them on nearly every continent except for Antarctica. Because, let's face it, nothing really likes Antarctica. Tortoise beetles thrive in areas with lots of vegetation, especially where their host plants are. Now, tortoise beetles are host-specific insects, which simply means they tend to stick to a particular group of plants to feed on and lay their eggs. One of their all-time favorites, though, is the morning glory. In fact, some species of tortoise beetles are so closely associated with morning glories that you can almost guarantee finding one if you've got those flowers in your garden. Other common host plants include sweet potatoes and their kin in the Convolvulaceae family. They prefer tender leaves, and their larvae will feed on them as well. Now, for gardeners out there, tortoise beetles can sometimes be seen as pests because they feed on the plant's leaves. But they're not usually around in numbers big enough to cause major damage. Plus, they're like little works of art, so I'd say give them a pass. In North America, one of the most common species you'll see is the golden tortoise beetle. It's got an incredibly shiny gold-colored shell, like it's been dipped in metal. But it gets even better. You see, this shell can actually change colors depending on its mood or health. Yep. It can go from shiny gold to more reddish brown when disturbed or feeling sick. Talk about wearing your emotions on your sleeve. Or shell, in this case. Most tortoise beetles are active during warmer months of the year. In temperate regions, you're most likely to see them from spring through late summer, especially on sunny days. The specific timing can vary based on climate, but generally they follow the seasons of their host plants. As the weather cools down, adults will either die off or go into a sort of dormant state called diapause until conditions improve. In tropical regions, however, where it's warm year-round, some species of tortoise beetles can be active throughout the entire year. The life cycle for these is pretty interesting because they don't do the normal beetle thing. What's the normal beetle thing? Turn into a white C-shaped grub and bury into the soil. Tortoise beetle larvae are flat, spiny, and have this odd behavior of carrying their own poop or frass, and they carry it on their backs as a sort of shield. They don't just wear it like some other insects, such as bagworms. These tortoise beetle caterpillars carry the frass like an umbrella or movable shield, and they can change its direction to face incoming danger using their flexible hind. Predators are less likely to want to snack on something covered in its own waste, especially when the waste seems to move wherever they're facing. The larvae use this shield as a defense mechanism as they crawl around munching on leaves. They're like the vegan relative to ladybugs, whose larvae crawl around munching on aphids. Actually, it's been reported that golden tortoise beetles often change colors to red or orange with black spots when stressed, which seems to me like they're trying to mimic the poisonous ladybugs. And yes, ladybugs are poisonous to their predators, and even some pets. But I believe we talked about that already back in the ladybug episode. Male tortoise beetles can apparently change their colors faster than females, and they shine a bright gold when copulating.
Interesting.
If you're curious about how this happens, the beetles control liquid in the outer layer of their shell, which changes how light is reflected off of it. Some tortoise beetles, like the Geiger tortoise beetle, Eurypepla callichroma, change colors based on whether they're in shade or in the sun, and it appears to be an automated response, more or less. The larval stage for tortoise beetles lasts around 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the species and environmental conditions. When it comes to behaviors, tortoise beetles act more or less like an actual tortoise, by spending their days munching away on leaves of their favorite host plants. If provoked or touched, they won't fly away like a tortoise either. They'll simply hunker down by clinging to their leaf and hiding all their appendages under their tough shells. So, what kind of monsters would dare eat our little tortoise friends, you might be asking? I'll tell you, it's those darn parasitoid wasps again. But birds are also a large culprit for their demise. There's really no lore for tortoise beetles, as with lots of these more specific insects, but nonetheless they're incredible, and I hope you now have a greater appreciation or even awareness for the tortoise beetle. Please make sure to rate the show and leave a review if you haven't yet over on Apple. Comments and ratings on Spotify are another great way to interact with me and the show other than the Instagram page. You can support the show by going to Patreon and getting bonus episodes, ad-free episodes, or joining the most popular tier to get all that and vlogs of insect raising and collecting. And the vlogs tend to be longer than mainline episodes of the show, some of which last more than 30 minutes. Thank you again for listening.